Yo, it's Go, and welcome to the video. I had a nice long chat yesterday with Floopus. They are a rank 1 Moonkin, currently in Season of Mastery. We talked about tons of things, like how the AQ war effort is going to open the gates for AQ 20 and AQ 40, a little bit about Scarab Lords, and then we dove into all things Black Wing Lair, how all the bosses changed, and their strategies to handle those new changes as a Moonkin. So without further ado, on to the interview. Alright, so Floopus, what is your experience with World of Warcraft? Did you just start playing in Season of Mastery? I'm assuming not. You probably started 15 years ago, like most of us. But where did you start at, and how did you get to playing Season of Mastery currently now?
So I started playing in vanilla, original vanilla, because I'm old, at the, I would say about 2 months before TBC released, original Burning Crusade, is when I started playing. I was in high school with some friends, and since then, a lot of us have played together through various expansions, just together, not together. We would make guilds. It would be great. We've been playing a really long time. When Classic came about, I had actually not played the last 2 expansions. I was super excited because nostalgia is a drug, and I was very pumped to just get high on nostalgia. Then after Classic, Classic TBC just didn't come at the right time for me, and it didn't feel the same. So then when they announced Season of Mastery, a bunch of my friends guilted me. I say guilted, strong arm. They peer pressured me. I was peer pressured. I've loved SoM. I think that it's a great type of game for someone enfranchised like myself, who's been around forever, who's seen everything. Giving a new spin to the game has been really, really great for the community that plays it. Not super big, but dedicated and excited.
So you're doing really well in the Boomkin. Is that your only class you've played? Did you start off playing a different class and switch to playing Booming?
My Boomkin is my main alt, is what I would call him. My main character is a human warlock. I love warlock so much, but I also just love raiding. So after I made my warlock, got it up and started raiding, I wanted to raid on something else, and a Boomkin felt like an amazing, entertaining challenge.
Yeah, you went from a class with no mana issues, if you want to call it that, because you can life tap, to the most out of mana class you could have picked.
I won't lie, the transition was jarring.
Yeah?
So I had never played Boomkin intensely before.
Mm-hmm.
I'd played it a bit. I knew all the spells, obviously, and I knew what everything did, but I never really dove into the class very much. And coming from someone who has really only played Warlocks and Warriors for a long time, that's essentially what I did, Boomkin was a new challenge. Although I will say, one of the things that does transfer over is consume usage in raids.
Okay.
Because Warlocks, while we can life tap, every single time you life tap, it's like saying goodbye to your parse.
Yeah.
Right? That's a GCD. That's just, you're never getting back, right? That's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm, a degenerate, so I use runes and mana pots on cooldown to do anything I have to do not to life tap. So those skills definitely transferred over. Because in a very similar way, a druid a Boomkin really needs all the help it can get and then some. So in that way, it was a little bit similar, but yeah, it's very different. Because at the end of the day, you can still life tap on a Warlock, but on a Boomkin, really all you can do is pray.
Do you get to keep your own Innervate, or do you have to hold it for a healer or a DPS class?
I think I'm going to get in trouble by answering this question in public. So there have been times where I have forgotten to use Innervate on myself, so I've accidentally been able to Innervate a healer. However, fights in SoM tend to be quite long, especially boss encounters, which, as we all know, is bad for Boomkins. The longer a fight goes, the worse it is.
Oh, yeah.
So I have sort of mainly been innervating myself. I'm so kicked out of this raid. Oh, I'm so dead.
Back to the Warlock.
Oh my god, this is my death now. This is it. Yeah. Yes, I innervate myself primarily because if I don't, I lose a lot of time and a lot of damage.
You're just standing there, not doing anything.
Mainly downranking.
Yeah.
And yeah, you need to innervate yourself to make any kind of impact.
I miss downranking because I used to do that in Classic, but it's a little bit of a thing in TBC, but not as much. We can't downrank to rank 1 like Classic can, and I thought that was really nice to farm with at least. You know, you go out and farm your runes, you just use a rank 1 root, rank 1 Starfire, that is.
Yeah, even in, I mean, obviously SoM has the same sort of scaling and spell power coefficient. What's inefficient about the Boomkin class? There are so many things, but our spell power coefficient on Starfire is pretty forgiving.
Yeah.
So rank 1 is not useless. I've never had to deal, again, I've played Warrior and Warlock. Neither of those classes downrank. That's just not a thing. So I've never had to really explore downranking. But now that I have, I really, really like it. And I honestly couldn't imagine a world where I couldn't do it.
Yeah. That was the worst thing, going from Classic to TBC, even from level 60 to 61. And I was testing it. I think they changed it while the beta was up, during the beta for TBC, and I downranked to rank 1 and it was fine, and then next thing I know there was a patch note and it was like, you can't downrank anymore, really. Like, the coefficient changed, and I was really sad.
I couldn't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Most of what I do is downranking, and I've put so much work into downranking, like to learning how to downrank properly in whatever given fight I'm in.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine not doing it. That's crazy.
Right. So right now, Season of Mastery, I've seen things about the AQ war effort. Is the war effort going on all the realms, or is that completed on some of them?
As of right now, I believe the war effort is still going on most realms. I can't say all realms because I haven't looked at every single realm.
Yeah.
I can say because the population in SoM is much lower than Classic, it's taking a bit longer. I know on the server I'm on, Jam Gabar is a very populated server, and our war effort is very far behind. The Alliance have only turned in 30% of their supplies. The Horde, I believe, is around that same thing, if not less than that. But Blizzard is going to be pushing the gates opening soon, within the next few weeks. So most groups, guilds, and farmers have stopped wasting their resources.
Yeah.
Right? Because what's the point if they're going to open it anyway?
Yeah.
So now everyone's just sort of preparing for AQ, getting ready for it to just be an absolutely monstrous nightmare. And we're sort of just biding our time, trying to like gear up and get consumes.
So is there a race for like Scarab Lords or anything like that?
There are many, many, many people going for Scarab Lords. It isn't as stressful as it was in Classic because there's so much time.
Yeah.
Right? The war effort has been out now, I want to say 3 weeks that we're going through it, and we're still not even close to being done. So you have Carapace farmers getting all the Silithid Carapace fragments, and they're everywhere. And even being everywhere, I could go to Silithus right now and still find empty caves.
Yeah.
Where there's just a bunch of bugs that no one's finding. So yes, there are a lot of people going for Scarab Lord, but it's not this crazy, stressful 24-hour a day thing. So after raid, whenever I'm in IF on my Boomkin form, I was approached before AQ released, and right when it released, like the war effort, by people offering to pay me gold per hour to tag for them. Because they thought it was going to be like Classic, where everything was this like cutthroat, battle to sort of get all the tags that you could, but it ended up not being that way.
It was stressful. I went into like caves by myself. Like, I was in a guild, so people could see my guild tag, but I was just farming for myself to like sell the fragments or whatever. And people were whispering my GM of my guild, like, hey, this guy's in our cave and we reserved this cave on this Discord. And I'm like, dude, I don't have time to join all these Discords and find out what guilds allotted this cave at this time. Like, that's just way too much. So was that stuff still going on too? Like, are guilds reserving hives like that?
Not formally, but mainly because they don't need to.
Yeah.
You have guilds that will just show up to a cave and they'll just stay there, and everyone else who's there will just leave.
Yeah.
There isn't this 24-hour farming thing. I would say most of the farming that's going on for the Carapace are from people who are farming them to sell to people making Scarab Lord.
Yeah.
For the last few weeks, people were buying Carapace fragments for 3 gold each.
That's
They were
pretty
buying
good.
1,000.
Yeah.
So a lot of the farmers are just people trying to make gold.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. Everyone who wants to do it can go do it. There's sometimes, obviously, at peak hours, there may be less than, the normal amount of scarabs up, but I haven't been down there in a situation where you can't find any. Not yet, at least. Which is nice, because in Classic, that was just such a toxic event.
It really was on our server. The
It's
server I was
much
on.
better
Yeah.
now. It's less stressful. You don't have people freaking out. And if people need extra fragments, they'll just buy them from the millions of farmers who just
All right, so there's 5 rogues, it looks like, in your BWL you ran tonight. Are any of those 5 rogues going for that Scarab Lord title?
The rogues specifically, no, at least not the ones who are in the raid tonight. However, we have like a priest who on one of his 5 alts, is going for Scarab Lord. Actually, he has 2 of the Broodlord heads on 2 different characters, so maybe he's going for 2. I don't know yet. But none of the rogues are going for Scarab Lord, at least in that run.
Not only do you have 5 rogues, but you have a pretty heavy melee stacked group comp. Is that normal week to week, or does that change?
Our comp is generally not the same week to week. We had 5 rogues this week. Sometimes we have 3, sometimes we have 6. We have a lot of variation in our guild week to week because our guild is a GDKP guild. For those who don't know, that means that essentially we use gold to buy all gear. It's just like if it was DKP, except instead of getting points, you just pay with gold. So we have 4 different raid groups every single week. The comps change. Different characters are with other characters. So generally, we try to have a comp that's similar to this, but sometimes it falls short. Like this one is very melee heavy. Sometimes that happens. Like this time it happened because we had a mage and a warlock not show up who were supposed to show up. And I think they were both replaced with melee. Sometimes it just ends up this way. So that I wouldn't say this is generally a normal comp. Usually we have a few more casters. But I would say a few more casters, a few less melee is probably normal for what our guild does.
It was almost looking like a speed running comp for a minute there. It was all the melee.
It was totally unintentional.
Okay.
We didn't realize it until we got into the raid. And all of the warriors who joined tonight just happened to have like rank 14 gear and previous BWL stuff that they had purchased. We just had some baller melee in the group.
Since you're in a GDKP guild, how much is Netharian's tier going for, and are you trying to buy one for yourself?
Nelth tier in general is definitely one of the more expensive items, as I think would be expected. It's Abyss Trinket kind of forever for everyone. The first Nelth tier that dropped, I actually got on my Warlock, and it was 15,000 gold. There are more expensive items in BWL, but Nelth tier is definitely on the higher end. I think now our tiers are going for around 10 to 12. If Nelth tier does drop and my Boomkin is in the raid, you can bet your butt that I will be all over bidding on that. I will spend a crap load of gold.
Yes.
The reason being, it's amazing. I need the hit so badly, and it is a lot of spell. Like it's just so good. It's just the best trinket. You put it on, and then you never take it off ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, and just a small tangent. I think that's one of the reasons that I really like GDKP so much, is because you don't have to worry about loot counseling. I don't get stopped from buying stuff because I'm a boomkin. Like my raid loves bringing me. They think it's hilarious. I think it's super funny every time because then all the casters want to be in my group. But I can buy whatever I want and no one's upset about it, Like I have a Shadowing Focus Staff. I have a Band of Force Concentration. I have a bunch of stuff from MC.
Yeah.
And I think that our loot system kind of lends itself towards like a pretty fair way to do things, because if I want something, I can get it. It's not like I'm locked behind being a spec that's unappreciated.
Money talks in Season of Mastery is what you're telling me.
Money talks mainly because, and I there's no way I'm the only one who thinks this, it feels like gold in SoM is like Monopoly money. Everyone's just throwing it around. Because at the end of SoM, these characters just go to classic era servers. Blizzard has said that.
Yep.
So we're just here for the experience, right? This just happened to be the kind of loot system that lended itself to like a no drama, no toxic environment where, if you win something, great, you got what you wanted. But if you don't win, someone else paid more money, and that means your cut's bigger, right? Like you're getting that money at the end. And I think it's the perfect place for a spec like Boomkin to exist, where you can feel useful and kind of do your job, but also not be totally screwed on gear.
Yeah.
You just need people who are like open-minded and understand that you actually aren't garbage.
Looking at the All-Stars for Phase 5, which is the current phase in Season of Mastery, you are on the top of the All-Star list. Did you set out playing Season of Mastery to play Boomkin at like the highest level compared to all the other Boomies? Or did that just kind of happen?
The short answer is I did not plan that at all. I thought that Boomkin looked fun and challenging, and there's this stubborn thing about me. I don't like when people say, oh, that spec is unplayable. Oh, that's terrible, you can't do it. It drives me nuts. I hate it. It's insane. So I kept hearing that over and over and over again, and I thought to myself, there's no way that it's so unplayable that it's just terrible. There's just no way. And then I looked more into it, and I love playing casters anyways. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I want a challenge. It looks interesting. So I just started playing it and then getting more and more into it and trying to learn how to be better, sort of in spite of everyone saying it was terrible. Like just trying my absolute best to just prove that it was better than, dog water. And I sort of just ended up where I am, I guess, which is really, I mean, that's not a very exciting answer, I suppose. But it's the truth. I didn't expect to end up at number 1 in everything. Like that's bananas, right? Like that's just not like a normal thing to happen. Even in, SoM, which has a lower population than, classic or retail, obviously. But yeah, this is not what I expected to do, like at all. Now that I'm here, I love it. It's great. I've never known what that would feel like, but it's awesome. Just being able, like, my guild freaks out about it too. Just being able to say, like, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm just the Boomkin now.
But it looks like there's 38 Boomies right now for Phase 5, which is about 10, 15 more than when I interviewed Mimu, who is still pumping. They're rank 3 right now for All-Stars, so still doing phenomenal.
Because if you're playing Boomkin, all right, either one of two things are true. You're just a baller who wants to do cool stuff and likes the challenge, or you're really fun to hang out with. It's one of those two, and it's always one of those two. So I love all Boomkins.
So looking at the first boss in BWL, you're 0.5 DPS below the rank 1. So you got that rank 2 spot right now. How do you feel about having the rank 2 by 0.5?
I can't even believe that you would bring... Okay, so this is the problem, all right?
I'm calling you out.
Okay, all right. Well, this is toxic. Okay, so here's what people need to know about the Razorgore fight in SoM, okay? It's not what it used to be, okay? It's just not. In addition to all the eggs breaking that you have to do, and in addition to all the mob spawning that you have to kill, there's a giant egg in the middle of the boss room. And after you destroy 10 eggs, a huge dragon spawns. It's an unstable chromatic drake. It has like 3 different breaths that it uses. It's a second boss in the fight. So you have a tank take the unstable drake to like a corner of the room, not die, and you have to dodge basically 3 different breaths. It has a fire breath that leaves fire on the ground, a giant line forever. It has a nature breath with a nature cloud that runs around putting people to sleep. And then it has a frost breath that puts an AoE on the ground, and if you stand in it, you freeze. And it does that the whole fight, or until you kill it. So what happens is, after 10 eggs, you get that stupid dragon, right? Now, you're tanking the dragon in the corner of the room. I promise the story's going somewhere. You tank the dragon in the corner of the room while you do the rest of the eggs and kill all the ads, like the normal fight. Once that's over, and phase 2 starts, you have your tanks go to Razorgore like normal, but all the DPS have to kill the Drake first. And that starts your parse timer. So I'm spending all my time killing this stupid dragon, and every second I'm attacking the dragon and not attacking Razorgore, my parse goes down. But I'm under strict instructions from my very loud raid leaders that I am not allowed to attack Razorgore before that dragon's dead. So no, I cannot get the 100 parse, and I'm very upset about it. But if I'm allowed 1 week to attack Razorgore without having to attack that stupid dragon, you can bet your sweet patootie that I will be number 1 again.
So you went over some changes with the first boss. What about Veil? That used to be like a sub 1 minute fight. You pop all cooldowns and just nuke the boss. What kind of changes are there with Veil?
So Vaelastrasz is still a similar theme, right? The goal is still to just kill her as fast as possible because she's dangerous and is killing the entire raid. That hasn't changed. Fire damage all the time. 2 main differences with her. The first is she has a crap load of health now. Instead of starting at, I think it was like 35% that she started at in Classic, she now starts at 75% health. So there's a lot more work you have to do, which means a lot more healing. It's just a longer, grindier fight. The other big difference is they completely changed Burning Adrenaline. And this is why I don't have the 100 part. I'm getting angry already. This is why I don't have the 100 parts on that fight either. The way Burning Adrenaline works now, the way it used to work is you'd get Burning Adrenaline, then you die, right? That's just what happens.
Or you hearth out and potentially grief Stormwind. Yeah.
Yeah, right? New Burning Adrenaline still will eventually kill you, maybe. But what it does now is it stacks over time. Every single stack of Burning Adrenaline you get as it builds itself gives you a higher percentage damage you deal, haste, a ton of haste on your spells or attacks, and with each stack, it increases the amount of damage you take per tick. So, let's say one person, the tank gets Burning Adrenaline, right? So the tank is sitting there with Burning Adrenaline. They're taking more and more damage every single, 2 seconds. They're just taking more and more damage, but they're also dealing more damage, and they have haste. So eventually, if you keep someone alive long enough, they're going to have haste to bring their spells and attacks down to the actual GCD, to where they literally couldn't get any faster.
Yeah.
And their damage is going to be so high that they account for over half of the total damage in the fight, if you keep them alive long enough. Burning Adrenaline still applies to a random person, right? So you kind of have to hope to get Burning Adrenaline if you want to parse on that fight. Yeah. Because without Burning Adrenaline, you're just standing there like a rube doing normal things, while somebody standing next to you has 300% increased damage that keeps stacking and 1,000,000% increased haste that needs heals pumped into them. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. Most of the time in our raids, we just let those people die because it's just, we let them attack for a little bit, but that's how they make up for Veil's health being 75%, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge health pool you need to get it down, so your Burning Adrenaline targets will deal that increased damage. I've never gotten it on my Boomkin, so I haven't even had the chance to try.
Yeah, I was looking at one of the Warlocks casting while they had Burning Adrenaline, and you could barely see their cast bar because it would just cast so quick.
It was as fast as is mathematically allowed in the game's design.
Mm-hmm. So the third boss, you do have the rank 1 parse over Mimu. Shout out Mimu. And
finally, I did something not embarrassing.
And that's Broodlord after we've gone through the depression or suppression room. So has that room changed at all leading up to the boss? And how has that boss changed? Because under a minute seems pretty quick.
None of the trash in BWL has been changed really at all. So suppression room is generally the same. It's still very annoying and you hate it and no one likes it and it's awful. But it is the same. As for Broodlord himself, his original design change was that he would do a charge in addition to what he normally does. He would just charge somebody and do the swing that would deal a bunch of damage or something. I say or something because in reality, he actually doesn't do anything different at all. The reason the fights are so quick is because it's like a normal classic fight. And since we're so used to now other fights that are not like classic, you sort of just beat the living crap out of Broodlord.
So even without world buffs, he just melts.
Falls right over without an additional mechanic.
So none of the trash changed. So going from Broodlord to the dragons up ahead, those mobs in between had that debuff where they would take additional arcane, frost, fire damage. Do you still
bet they do?
You get to pump on those mobs still too, huh?
So one of the best feelings on the planet ever is getting a nature vulnerability. The reason why nature is so great is because on Alliance, no one deals nature damage. besides the Boomkin Druid.
Yeah.
So everyone gets upset when it's Nature Vuln, but I'm just sitting there with my 1.5 second cast Wraths, just smack, 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 smack. And I end up being top DPS, and everyone thinks it's hilarious. What's nice, though, is in addition to Nature, we also do more on Arcane than mages do.
Yeah.
So generally, what people like to see the least is Arcane and Nature, right? Because you have the Warlocks and the Mages want basically anything that aren't those. So I cover both of those bases really well. So when they're upset, I'm happy, and that's hilarious.
Before getting to the other dragons, I forgot about Firemaw. Do you still need to wear that cloak and fire resistance gear and stuff for Firemaw?
So Firemaw is the same, but with more stuff. So tanks still need to wear the Oni cloak because they get shadow breathed. That's just the thing. All tanks have to wear it. It's actually probably good for a lot of melee to wear it in case they pull threat because, warriors, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
But casters, healers, they don't have to wear the Oni cloak, really. You don't really even have to wear that much fire resistance. What we do is pre-pop fire protection potions and nature protection potions. Because Firemaw's new thing, which is very exciting and great and not at all terrible, is whenever you take damage from Firemaw, you get a stack of this like lightning energy, and then whenever you get to 10 stacks, you blow up chain lightning everyone around you for nature damage. And then when they take that damage, their stacks go up too. So then if they get to 10, they chain everyone else around them. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's this chain reaction of crazy nonsense. And every single one of Firemaw's just great little pulses of fire energy, if you take damage from those, you just start getting ticks. So what we're doing in a very careful way is when you get to like 3 or 4 stacks, and the amount of fire damage you're starting to take goes up because there is the normal mechanic where you get stacks, right? You get the fire stacks on you from the damage.
Mm-hmm.
You go out and you wait for those to drop at really early, like 3-4 stacks, because you really don't want to start taking big damage from these because you'll start getting lightning stacks. And then once you start getting lightning stacks, they build up and you blow up everybody. So you try to stay as careful as you can, LOS, to drop your stacks before going back in and dealing damage. If you do get too many lightning stacks, like 7 or 8, you're almost up to 10, you have to run way away from the boss so that when you do get to 10, you blow up with no one near you and you don't kill anybody. So for a Boomkin, this fight is actually pretty great. It's kind of an improvement over the old version. Because as a Boomkin, you now have an excuse to not attack. So I'm unloading my mana, right? I'm using max rank Starfire. I'm hitting with Moonfire. I'm using my Toep, my Zandalari Charm, my Mana Pot. And then when I get to, 4 stacks of the fire debuff, I just LOS. And because you get 4 stacks so often, you have a lot of LOS time. It gives you a lot of time to get mana back passively. So really, it's probably one of the least intensive, or it's one of the least mana intensive fights that we have. Not on purpose. They definitely didn't mean to do that. It just sort of ends up being that way because you do have a decent amount of downtime if you're being responsible and you don't want to kill yourself. And that's how I've gotten high parses on Firemaw, is I leave when I'm at 3 or 4 stacks of this, fire. I'll just go around the corner and just wait. Because it's not really a go all out DPS fest. It's a survival fest.
Yeah.
Your goal is uptime. Your goal is not being dead.
So I'm looking at your damage done on the fight, and there's no insect swarm damage. Are you not spec'd into insect swarm?
So I am generally just not using insect swarm at all. I know that a lot of Boomkins like it, and I'm not saying that it's terrible, but I have to be out of Boomkin form to use it.
Yeah.
And that's really, really tough for me. I've done it before. I've parsed it out, but the extra 300 mana that I'm losing by having to go back into Moonkin form is not brilliant. I've seen a lot of people who they'll take advantage of being out of Moonkin form with either Fairy Fire or they'll pre-innervate, and then they'll start their fight by innervating and then going into Moonkin form. I just don't like doing that. I think it's a loss of uptime, and I've just had bad experiences with it. So I've actually just foregone insect swarm. On paper, I think it's really, really good. But in practice, because I can't be in Moonkin form to use it, it just takes too many resources to like be viable for me. When I first started playing Boomkin and looked around at what everyone else was doing, they were all casting Insect Swarm. So I started doing it, and every time I did, I'm like, this just feels bad. Like I don't like doing this. Like this just doesn't feel right.
It doesn't seem like Insect Swarm's really like holding on throughout Season of Mastery.
I think Insect Swarm is extremely overvalued because it looks like it's good. Like when you read it, it actually seems pretty good. Like it seems pretty decent. In a vacuum, when I read that, I'm like, wow, like that's a powerful ability. Why don't I see it everywhere? Or like, why don't I see people talking about it? And it's because obviously one, only Moonkins generally use it. Like I've seen Rester Druids cast it like a few times, but all the parses I've looked at with people using Insect Swarm, it's Boomkins at the beginning of their rotation. And when you do the math, especially with the better gear that you have, like as you gear up, it's just not worth losing that 300 mana. Like that 300 mana is a max rank Starfire to me. So is Insect Swarm worth a max rank Starfire to me? Heck no.
Who is in your group? Is it Locks and Mages?
So it is the 3 highest parsing casters and a healer.
Is it usually a priest or does it vary? Like a priest?
It's usually
druid?
A priest. It's been a paladin a few times. It's usually a priest. I would say the class makeup is usually 2 mages and a warlock, sometimes 3 mages, based on the warlocks that we bring to that specific raid. Again, like our composition or our roster changes on a weekly basis because we run 4 different raid teams, so you're not going to see the same people in every group. I would say on average it's 2 mages and a warlock. And it's always just the ones who have the best parses, who the raid leaders think will just benefit the most. If you're looking at the parses from like the most recent one, Cherry Lips, the mage at the top of the damage, she was in my group. Obviously as a charity because she's okay, I guess. But yeah, like she was in there because she's like one of the highest parsing mages. And then we had our highest parsing warlock in there, and then another high parsing mage, and that's usually how it goes.
All right, well that's the end of part 1. Keep an eye out for part 2, maybe part 3. But thanks for watching and enjoy a couple of outtakes. Alright, so we're into the third boss, and we finally have a rank 1.
Oh, that's so funny! That's so funny! Wow, look at this funny guy. Oh, you're freaking hilarious, bud.
I almost got through it.
Unbelievable. Cherry is a very, very sweaty mage, and one of my friends like in the guild, and we shit on each other constantly.
The shout out to Cherry Lips.
For being terrible. For needing to get carried by a Boomkin. If I log on and my raid leader's like, oh, I didn't know about this ability called Insect Swarm, and now they want me to use Insect Swarm, I'm blaming you for my lower parse.